book that it was like, 12 by a full-size book, maybe 50 pages, 100 pages. But they were all, can you picture like what a first grade cartoon is, a first grade coloring book, just the outline, right? Just the outline. And every page was an outline, but it was for wood cutting. It was to make things in a jigsaw. So the idea is you would take this and draw it on a piece of wood, freehand, and then you'd make that product. They had the, bird box, they had all 4 pieces, and how you make this thing. And so I hadn't seen this book since I was in 6th grade, 5th grade, because I used to have a jigsaw. So I'm flipping through this, because I spent a lot of time in this book. And I'm flipping through it, and I said, I made that, 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 I made that. I kept going through, I made that, I made that, I made that. And I started thinking as I'm going through it, I couldn't have made all these things. Where would they be? I don't ever remember them being in shelves. I don't remember ever losing them. And I realized it was just that I had so looked at that so often as a child, the lines between reality and my imagination blurred, and I remembered all of that as being real. It was really a shocker, because I'm telling you, I knew I made all those things, but it's not possible. Now, here's the point on reading those spurious books. When you first read them, you're going to know the difference between the books of the Bible and what you just read. But as a year goes by, 2 years goes by, and you start thinking about, and the problem is they tie into the stories in the Bible. So it's not like it's a completely unrelated story that you can't make any connection to. It ties into it. They'll talk about Joshua, they'll talk about Jesus. So what happens is, as soon as you're reading the book, you're saying, "Oh no, that's not what Luke says. That Luke says something different about that, or that's not included in any of the Gospels. That's extra." But after some time, you can't keep that separate anymore. And so you can start accepting as fact things that you read in those books and you don't remember where they came from, and you think they're legitimate. So the idea is it's really better not to mess with that stuff. It really is. If you read stuff that's completely unrelated, that's safer. But when you get into those places where they talk about the same stories but add detail, that's where you get in trouble. Peter, yes?
I don't want to open up a can of worms, but I want to take Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. A lot of people don't even know what Nephilim are. Is it worth to know what Nephilim are with like a book of Enoch or something like that?
No, we know what they are. Giants.
Half angel, half man.
Can of worms.
Never mind.
There are varying positions on that, but most lean toward those being the children in relationships between angels and demons. Yes.
What about those books, the Catholic Bible?
Yeah, the Apocrypha. Yeah, those were not accepted. When people say, when you look at the canon of the Old Testament and the New, the books of the Old Testament and the books of the New Testament, people will say, well, they had was it Council of Trent? What was the council where they decided it in like the 400s, 500s, and they decided the 27 books that are going to be in the Bible. And people say, wow, it sure took a long time for that to happen. They're just floating around with all these other books of Thomas. And so those books have been in circulation. Everybody's confused. And finally, Constantine says, look, we're going to have a council and decide this finally. The truth is that the Jewish books, the books in the Old Testament, those were and are agreed upon for centuries by the Jews. There's really no question in that. Throw that one away. On the New Testament, the early church, and in the first 100 years, they all agreed on the 27 books, with some very slight Revelation, James, some very small issues, but 27 books. What happened was, as time went on, more books started appearing later, not in the beginning, later, and people started claiming that these should be included. So if you think that when the gospel was written, when Paul wrote the epistles, that was a time where there were just all these people writing crazy books of the Bible, and they had to settle that down 400 years. That's not how it was. Out of the gate, 27 books. And then over time, they started trying to add books, 200, 300. And then the Council of Trent was to bring that thing back to some reasonable period. So when you know that, it adds a lot of confidence in the books in the Bible, okay? Because it really was agreed upon. So, and that all has nothing to do with Proverbs, does it? Oh, I gave it away. You know what book we're in now. Proverbs, what chapter?
26.
What verse? 23. Very good. Here we go. 26, 23. Smooth words, get the first picture up there. Smooth words may hide a wicked heart, just as a pretty glaze covers a common clay pot. New King James says it this way: fervent lips with a wicked heart are like earthenware covered with silver dross. With silver dross. The ISV says this, quote, a clay vessel plated with a thin veneer of silver. That's what smooth lips with a wicked heart are. A clay pot plated with a thin veneer of silver. And the idea here is that the lips are pretending to love much and are showing affection and devotion, but the heart of that person is filled with treachery or hatred or contempt. The words are sweet and glowing, but underneath are daggers. Now, this is like a piece of common broken clay pot that shines on the outside with silver paint covering over it, causing you to think that it might be silver through and through. That's what is displayed on the surface. You think that what is sprayed on the surface is consistent throughout, but it's only a veneer. Did you get it? So the idea here is that someone is saying sweet things to you, very nice things to you, and you think it's through and through, but it's just on the surface. You get it? It's lip service, right? The term is lip service or two-faced. You're seeing, they want you to see the shine, but underneath that is contempt. It's a different heart. It isn't what the words reflect. Let's look at some examples of this. Go back to 1 Samuel 18. 1 Samuel 18. Verse 13. This is Saul and David. Saul and King David. So this is, again, somebody whose words are kind, but underneath there's hatred. Let's start at 8. What did I say? 18:13. Thank you. Finally, Saul banned David from his presence and appointed him commander over only 1,000 men. But David faithfully led his troops into battle. David continued to succeed in everything he did, for the Lord was with him. When Saul recognized this, Saul is a king, and David is a general under him. When Saul recognized this, he became even more afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he was so successful at leading his troops into battle. One day Saul said to David, I'm ready to give you my older son Merab as your wife. But first you must prove to yourself to be a real warrior by fighting the Lord's battles. For Saul thought to himself, I'll send him out against the Philistines and let them kill him rather than me doing it myself. Does that sound like silver plate on the outside, but a wicked heart underneath? And see, this is the life of Saul. Always saying those things and then going on into that. In verse 24, it says, when Saul's men reported back to the king, he told them, tell David that all I want for the bride price is 100 Philistine foreskins. Vengeance on my enemies is all that I really want. I got to tell you this because this is funny. We're all adults here. I was in we had a managers meeting where we had all the managers from all the different dealerships together at a breakfast meeting, and I read this in a Bible study, and most of them weren't believers, and I wasn't sure what they do with this. And when I said, all I want for the bride price is 100 Philistine foreskins, the one manager goes, ooh. I said, no, it was worse than that. It's worse than that. And I explained the detail. But whenever I read that, I always think of, I won't give his first name, but when he said that. But what Saul had in mind was that David would be killed in the fight. David was delighted to accept the offer. So again, Saul is trying to get him wiped out. And the veneer, the words are kind, but underneath are daggers. Look then at 2 Samuel 20. 2 Samuel 20, a book later, 9 and 10. This is a story of Joab, who killed Amasa. Let's start at 7. Some of you know this story, some of you don't. 2 Samuel 20, verse 7. So Abishai and Joab set out after Sheba with an elite guard from Joab's army and the king's own bodyguard. As they arrived at the great stone in Gibeon, Amasa met them. Amasa is the commander of the other army, of Saul's army. Coming from the opposite direction, Joab was wearing his uniform with a dagger strapped to his belt. Now, these men are both generals, commanders in Israeli armies. One under David, one under Saul. So, they're not really enemies. So, Amasa had no reason to be afraid of Joab. It says, as they arrived at the great stone in Gibeon, Amasa met them, coming from the opposite direction. Joab was wearing his uniform with a dagger strapped to his belt. As he stepped forward to greet Amasa, he secretly slipped the dagger from its sheath. How are you, my cousin? Joab said, and took him by the beard with his right hand as though to kiss him. Amasa didn't notice the dagger in his left hand, and Joab stabbed him in the stomach with it so that his insides gushed out under the ground. Joab did not need to strike again, and Amasa soon died. That's a veneer. That's a greeting that made Amasa feel that he was safe with Joab. But man, it was not through and through. He was two-faced, lip service. And then one more New Testament, Matthew 26. Matthew 26, verse 49. The best commentary in the Bible is the Bible. So when you can find stories in the Bible that make the points, it's the best place to be looking. The best place for stories. Matthew 26, 49. Matthew 26, 48. Judas had given them a prearranged signal. You will know which one to arrest when I go over and give him the kiss of greeting. So Judas came straight to Jesus. Greetings, teacher, he exclaimed, and gave him the kiss. And again, a veneer, right? It looked like sincerity on the outside, but Judas knew that underneath was treachery. It was lip service, two-faced. So there are two takeaway points from this as I've studied this. Beware of insincere people. Beware of insincere people. How can you discern this? Do their actions match their words? Do their actions match their words? As some of you are young yet, you're all younger than me. But what you learn in life is there are too many times when you're young that after something happens, you say to yourself, I should have seen that. I noticed something that I should have picked up on. And you have to learn to pick up on those things. You need to see those, hear them, be aware of them early, because you can save yourself a lot of pain, especially in this one, insincere. So beware of insincere people. Do their actions match their words? Jesus said a tree is identified by its fruit. Fruit, right. What's been produced? Don't get caught in the leaves. Don't look how pretty the leaves are or how full the branches are. That's not where you examine a tree. You examine a tree by looking at the fruit. Do their actions match their words? The second thing is then, on the giving side, always be sincere. Let that be said about you. Joe Carroll is a sincere, very real person. Work hard at being sincere. One is honest, the other is dishonest. It's dishonest to be insincere. The word sincere is, the root of it is Latin, sincerus. It means pure, clean, untainted. Pure, clean, untainted. In your actions with others, be pure, pure, clean, untainted. Okay? Got that? That's the mark. Be sincere. You might be wrong, but be sincere. Don't be two-faced. The next verse, Proverbs 26, 24 to 26, because these all fit together. Proverbs 26, 24. People with hate in their hearts may sound pleasant enough, but don't believe them. Though they pretend to be kind, their hearts are full of all kinds of evil. While their hatred may be concealed by trickery, it will finally come to light for all to see. It's the same as the previous verse, except this one is more than sincere. There's hatred underneath. This is hatred. This person hates you. But they still have that veneer of a smile. They're trying to con you into thinking they like you and everything's fine, but deep down there's hatred. And this is a scary person. Look at 1 Kings. 1 Kings, that's right after 2 Samuel, where we were before. 1 Kings 21. This is the story of Naboth's vineyard. Some of you know this story. This is where Ahab, who was a king, there was a field that he wanted really bad, and the guy would not sell it. He wouldn't agree to sell it, so they go by deceit to get it. So again, this is 1 Kings 21:1. King Ahab had a palace in Jezreel, and near the palace was a vineyard owned by a man named Naboth. One day Ahab said to Naboth, the king said to this guy that owns the field, "Since your vineyard is so convenient to the palace, I would like to buy it to use it as a vegetable garden. I will give you a better vineyard in exchange, or if you prefer, I will pay you for it." But Naboth replied, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance that was passed down from my ancestors." So Ahab went away angry and sullen because of Naboth's answer. The king went to bed with his face to the wall and refused to eat. "What in the world is the matter?" his wife Jezebel asked him. So Ahab's married to Jezebel. Do you think there's anything good about Jezebel? No, right. She is a witch. "What has made you so upset that you're not eating?" "I asked Naboth to sell me his vineyard or to trade, and he refused," Ahab told her. "Are you the king of Israel or not?" she asked. "Get up and eat, and don't worry about it. I'll get you Naboth's vineyard." So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, sealed them with his seal, and sent them to the elders and other leaders in the city where Naboth lived. In her letters she commanded, "Call the citizens together for fasting and prayer." You see what she's doing here? She's calling them to fast and pray. This is a con using spirituality at the root of it, at the top of it. Call the people together for fasting and prayer and give Naboth a place of honor. Find 2 scoundrels who will accuse him of cursing God and the king, then take him out and stone him to death. Under the guise of prayer and fasting, this is all going to take place. So the elders and other leaders followed the instructions Jezebel had written in the letters. They called for a fast and put Naboth in a prominent place before the people. Can you picture that? The people are all gathered, and then these two scoundrels show up. Two scoundrels accused him before the people of cursing God and the king. So he was dragged outside the city and stoned to death. The city officials sent word to Jezebel, Naboth has been stoned to death. When Jezebel heard the news, she said to Ahab, you know the vineyard Naboth wouldn't sell you? Well, you can have it now. He's dead. So immediately Ahab went down to the vineyard to claim it. Now you talk about a veneer that sounds good, looks good, is like silver painted on a clay jar, but underneath is hatred. That is this story. That is the story. And there's one more, Judges, which is in front of 1 Kings. Judges 9. And the Judges were the periods where they're before the kings, and God would raise up judges from time to time when the people got in trouble. And this is a story about Abimelech. Judges 9:22. It says, after Abimelech, he was a judge, ruled over Israel for 3 years, God stirred up trouble between Abimelech and the people of Shechem, and they revolted. In the events that followed, God punished Abimelech and the men of Shechem for murdering Gideon's 70 sons. The people of Shechem set an ambush for Abimelech on the hilltops and robbed everyone who passed that way. But someone warned Abimelech about their plot. At that time, Gaal, son of Ebed, moved to Shechem, where his brothers gained the confidence of the people of Shechem. During the annual harvest festival at Shechem, held in the temple of the local god, the wine flowed freely, and everyone began cursing Abimelech. He's the leader. Who is this Abimelech? Gaal shouted. He's not a true descendant of Shechem. Why should we be Abimelech's servants? He's merely the son of Gideon and Zubal, and is his administrator. Serve the men of Hamor, who are Shechem's true descendants. Why should we serve Abimelech? If I were in charge, I would get rid of Abimelech. I would say to him, get some soldiers and come out and fight. But when Zubal, the leader of the city, heard what Gaal was saying, he was furious. He sent messengers to Abimelech in Arumah, telling him, Gaal, son of Ebed, and his brothers have come to live in Shechem, and now they are inciting the city to rebel against you. Come by night with an army and hide out in the fields. In the morning, as soon as it is daylight, storm the city. When Gaal and all those who are with him come out against you, you can do with them as you wish. So Abimelech and his men went by night and split into 4 groups, stationing themselves around Shechem. Gaal was standing at the city gates when Abimelech and his army came out of hiding. So this Gaal is for Abimelech. When Gaal saw them, he said to Zubal, look, there are people coming down from the hilltops. Zubal replied, it's just shadows on the hills that look like men. But again, Gaal said, no, people are coming down from the hills. And another group is coming down the road past the diviner's oak. Then Zubal, who was for Abimelech, turned on him triumphantly. Now where's that big mouth of yours? He demanded. Wasn't it you that said, who is Abimelech, and why should we be his servants? The men you mocked are right outside the city. Go out and fight. And then they go and they do battle, and Gaal is beaten, and Abimelech wins. But again, here's a case where Zubal presented a certain attitude toward Gaal, but underneath was deception, treachery. And note in verse 26 it says, it will finally come to light for all to see. It will finally come to light. This treachery will come to light for all to see. And, you know, some of you have seen this as well, but it does work this way. You give something time. It's like it says, time is truth's best friend. Time is truth's best friend. And so the idea is when you get into some of these things, when there's treachery, when there's deceit, when someone is saying kind, sweet things and people can't sort it out, and you're in the center of that, guys, ladies, the best thing you can do is remain silent. Don't defend yourself. See, the way it works out is either you'll defend yourself or God will. That's how it is. God says, you want to defend yourself? Go ahead. You might do okay. Just might. You might do okay. But if you get out of the way, I'll defend you. I'll defend you. Silence is the best. You say Scripture for that? Yep. Here's Scripture. 1 Peter 2. And guys, I would mark this one and maybe even dog tear the page. Dog ear. The page. Thank you. 1 Peter 2, 21. 1 Peter 2:21. You want to know where this is someday. This suffering is all part of what God has called you to. Christ, who suffered for you, is your example. Follow in his steps. So he's saying Jesus is your example. When you suffer, you should do what he did. What did he do? 21, 22. He never sinned. He never deceived anyone. Well, we messed that one up. 23, here it is. He did not retaliate when he was insulted. When he suffered, he did not threaten to get even. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. Did you get that? That's 1 Peter 2:21. He never threatened to get even. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. He left his case in the hands of God. And that's what we need to do. We need to leave it in the hands of God. And Jesus modeled this. Matthew 27, and it worked. Matthew 27, 12. Matthew 27. Matthew 27, 12. And it just makes sense when you think about it. We'll talk about that. Matthew 27, 12. Matthew 27, 12. This is Jesus before Pilate. Matthew 27, 12. But when the leading priests and other leaders made their accusations against Jesus, Jesus remained silent. Pilate said, "Don't you hear there are many charges against you?" But Jesus said nothing, much to the governor's great surprise. How many accused people do you think ever stand before judges and don't say anything? Don't defend themselves. Don't say, "I'm guilty. Hands down, I'm flat guilty. I deserve more than you're ever going to give me." How many times do judges hear that? Zero. Yeah. So, I mean, that's in a trial. But in life, if you get into one of these deals with someone and they say one thing and you say another thing, and there's a whole bunch of people listening and watching to try to figure out what's going on, folks, I'm telling you, your silence, as time gets added to your silence, people will read your silence as innocence. They will. And you think, I got to defend myself. It works the opposite. The more, and they'll think more of you. They'll respect you more for keeping your mouth shut. There was a situation with the dealership I was in where there was a man that I worked with, and he went to our church. He was in a management position, and some things happened, and we needed to release him. And it made a big stink in the church. And I said to my dad, "What do I do?" He said, "Don't say a thing." This is when I was still young. "Don't say a thing." I said, "I want to." He said, "Don't." Just don't say a thing. And I didn't, and it was hard, because people would ask questions. I remember in particular, and I've shared this story often, Sue was singing in the senior choir one Sunday, and this was just it blew up in the church. It was a big blow up. You may say, this sounds like a small thing. It was a big thing. He was in a leadership position. I was in a leadership position. It was a big thing, and he said things. And I remember Sue was in the senior choir standing facing the church on a Sunday morning when this was in full bloom. And I could see the pain in Sue's face as she looked out in the audience of the people. Because it was hard on her. It was hard on all of us. But I still remember you standing there. Do you remember that? I didn't say a thing. Never defended it. What happened was, months later, he had some problems in another area of his life. And he actually called me and asked for help, and I started meeting with him and counseling with him. Now, no one in the church knew that either. But it was just neat. And over time, the whole thing just blew up. It went away. And you know what you'll find is a lot of these, I'm not saying in this case I'm giving you now, but what you'll find in most of these cases, if it's the other person, there's going to start being fruit seen by people, and they're going to put it together. They're going to put it together. Does that make sense? Just let it alone. Just let it alone. There's another piece that ties into this, and this is in divorce. If you ever have friends and get into the situation, or if you've ever been here, if you're in a divorce and your children, and let's say you're the innocent person in that divorce, and your husband, your wife who left, is a rascal, and your children are I don't know, say early preteen, 10, 12, something like that, and you want to give them the whole lowdown. Let me tell you why that backfires in your face. Because this is what will happen. Let's say that you have a daughter, and let's say your husband was running around, all kinds of horrible stuff. Your daughter has no idea. And she blames you. She says, you're the reason. She's saying, you're the reason Dad left. He told me. Now, you may feel like you want to tell her the whole story. But this is what happens. If you start bashing him, he is still her father. And she will work all the harder. The more you bash him, the more she will elevate him and put him on a pedestal that he doesn't deserve, And the more you bash him, the more she idolizes him, and the more she will end up looking for someone like him. It works that way. So that's why, same thing. You just let them figure it out. But they're blaming me. Let them figure it out. They will. But I want them to know now. He left his case in the hands of God, who always judges fairly. Let time settle it. You're going to be better off in the long term. You will. You don't want to set that guy up on a pedestal and have your daughter or have your son look for a woman like your wife, because all you've done is tore her down, and in response to your tearing her down, she worked to build him up. So beware of that.
Hey, Tom.
Yes.
I got a good experience about that.
Okay.
Could I tell?
Sure. Go ahead.
Me and my ex-girlfriend, we were in a battle of custody.
A custody battle.
Yeah, for Carla.
Yes.
And she came with false witness and everything, saying that I molested my daughter.
Wow. Now, hold on. Let me explain. Because they can't hear you. He was in a custody battle, and the mother came to the hearing with false witnesses and said that he had molested his daughter.
My daughter, yeah. And I was real angry. And sometimes Satan, when I was sleeping, I used to cry a lot.
Yeah.
I said to her, why don't you kill her? Kill yourself and get over it.
Wow.
Some other people encourage me. Carlos, if you keep it, don't fight it. You keep it around, you're going to win.
Wow.
And guess what?
You won.
I win.
Yeah. Yeah. He said they gave him custody. And that, how often does that happen to the man? Yeah, where he didn't defend himself and they ended up giving him custody. Yeah. So folks, it's the way through these. It takes more time. Sometimes it'll take more time, but it's the way through. Okay? Let's go on. 26, 27. 26, 27. If you see a trap set for others, if you set a trap for others, you will get caught in it yourself. If you roll a boulder down on others, it will roll back and crush you. Boy, this is a good one. Look at Psalm 9:16. Psalms are right in front of Proverbs. Psalm 9:16. How many Psalms are there? 150. 150, very good. Psalm 9. I've told some of you this, but some of you are new. When I was in like 5th grade Sunday school class, my 6th grade Sunday school teacher said, if you ever want to find Psalms, just take the Bible, cut it right in the middle and open it, and you'll find Psalms. And I did it. I cut it. I went and I looked at her and I thought, she is a genius. That woman is a genius. It still works that way unless you have a commentary in the back. Psalm 9, verse 16 says, "The Lord is known for his justice. The wicked have trapped themselves in their own snares." And then look at Psalm 7:14. Psalm 7:14. Psalm 7:14. "The wicked conceive evil. They are pregnant with trouble and give birth to lies. They dig a pit to trap others and then fall in it themselves." Boy, I've been missing pictures. There's the pit. There's the trap. So some examples of this are in Daniel. Turn to Daniel. Talk about examples, perfect examples. This is one. Set a trap for someone, you'll get caught in it yourself. Daniel's a poster child for this proverb. Ezekiel, Daniel. Daniel chapter 6, verse 4. I love this story. Many of you do too. Let's start at 3. Daniel 6:3. "Daniel soon proved himself more capable than all the other administrators and princes." Daniel's in Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar's the king. Huge empire. Daniel is now proving himself. It says, "Because of his great ability, the king made plans to place him over the entire empire. Then the other administrators and princes began searching for some fault in the way Daniel was handling his affairs, but they couldn't find anything to criticize. He was faithful and honest and always responsible. So they concluded, our only chance of finding grounds for accusing Daniel will be in connection with the requirements of his religion. So the administrators and princes went to the king. Long live Darius." Here we go. Silver veneer, clay pot. "Long live King Darius. We administrators, prefect, princes, advisors, and other officials have unanimously agreed that your majesty should make a law that will strictly be enforced. Give orders for the next 30 days. Anyone who prays to anyone, divine or human, except for your majesty, will be thrown to the lions." Talk about a veneer, right? Same thing. They're just feeding his ego. "And let the majesty issue the sign, this law, so it cannot be changed, a law of the Medes and Persians." Once a king signed a law that was a law of the Medes and Persians, it could not be revoked. The king could not revoke it. It was fixed. So Darius signed the law. But, verse 10, "When Daniel learned that the law had been signed, he went home and knelt down as usual in his upstairs room with the windows open toward Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he had always done, giving thanks to his God. The officials went together at Daniel's house, found him praying and asking for God's help. So they went back to the king and reminded him about the law. 'Can't you see these sneaky guys? Didn't you sign a law that for the next 30 days, anyone who prays to anyone, divine or human, except to your majesty, will be thrown to the lions?' 'Yes,' the king replied, 'that decision stands. It's the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked.' Then they told the king, 'Here the trap is set and released. That man Daniel, one of the captives from Judah, is paying no attention to your law.' So to cut the story short, the king tries to get out of it. He can't. He's bound by his own law. He takes Daniel, puts him down in a pit of lions, and throws him in, and he says, verse 18. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night fasting. He refused his usual entertainment and couldn't fall asleep. Very early the next morning, the king hurried out to the lion's den. And I just got to pause here because I love this picture in my brain. You picture the Middle East. I picture this being June. Sun rises at like 5:30 in the morning. The whole city's asleep. It's already 90 degrees. And you don't hear a single sound of anybody stirring in the city except the flip-flops of the king as he runs to Daniel's den, to the lion's den. You hear this plop, 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 and he's running. He's not walking. Blah, 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 blah. And he's running to see if Daniel survived. Very early the next morning, verse 19, the king hurried out to the lion's den. When he got there, he called out in anguish, Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God whom you worship continually able to rescue you from the lions? Hey, to make another point, Daniel never defended himself. He never pled, cried out. He just went into the den. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they never defended themselves. They just went into the fire. Right? They let God defend them. Boy, did he. Different proverb, but it fits here. Again, verse 21. Daniel answered, long live the king. This guy is amazing. Man, I love Daniel. Here the king signed a decree. Dumb move. It almost got him eaten by lions. The guy that signed the decree shows up and says, Daniel, you're okay. And Daniel's first words, it shows the respect he had for authority. Daniel said, long live the king. Wow. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me. For I have been found innocent in his sight, and I have not wronged you. See that? I've been found innocent in his sight, not yours. His sight. He's my judge. He's my defender. I don't look to you. He's who I look to. He's my defender. And I have not wronged you, your majesty. The king was overjoyed and ordered that Daniel be lifted from the den. Not a scratch was found on him because he had trusted in his God. Then the king gave orders. Here it is. You roll a boulder, someone, set a trap, it'll come back on you. Then the king gave orders to arrest the men who had maliciously accused Daniel. He had them thrown into the lion's den, along with their wives and children. The lions leaped on them and tore them apart before they even hit the floor of the den. So when people say the reason lions didn't eat Daniel because they were already fed, you have to deal with when the next bunch came in. They kind of went crazy. So again, they set a trap. It came back on them. There's another story. We won't read the whole story, but it's in Esther. You know the story? Where Haman wants to kill all the Jews. And he really wants to kill Mordecai. He hates Mordecai because Mordecai won't bow down to him. Everybody bows down to Haman except Mordecai. Haman is second in command. And everybody bows down. But can you picture that? I mean, it's a huge empire. He goes through the city, everyone's bowing down, and one guy standing. That would kind of stand out, wouldn't it? That's, no pun intended. That would stand out. So he hates him. And so he decides to kill all the Jews. He wants to kill Haman. He figures, well, I might as just kill all of them. So he orders the decree. The king signs the decree that all the Jews will be killed on a certain day. But he really wants to kill Mordecai. So he has this gallows built, 75-foot high gallows, that he's going to hang, probably impale, actually. And impaling was not pretty. He was going to impale Mordecai from. The king finds out. Esther pleads and says this wicked Haman is plotting against us through a series of things that happen. He does a couple of bad moves. And so the king brings, well, let's go to that. We can at least look that up. It's in front of, find Psalms, and it's not far in front of that. Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms. Esther, Job, and then Psalms. So it's two books in front of the book of Psalms. Look at Esther 5:13. Esther 5:13. Esther 5:13. Then he added Mordecai, but this is all meaningless as long as I see Mordecai the Jew just sitting there at the palace gate. So Haman's wife Zeresh and all of his friends suggested, set up a gallows that stands 75 feet tall, and in the morning ask the king to hang Mordecai on it. When this is done, you can go your merry way to the banquet with the king. This pleased Haman immensely, and he ordered the gallows to be set up. So he set a trap for someone. But look what happens. Go to Esther 7. Esther 7. Yeah, we'll read this. This is worth it. Esther 7, verse 1. The king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet, and while they were drinking wine that day, the king asked her again, tell me what you want, Queen Esther. What is your request? I will give it to you even if it's half the kingdom. So Queen Esther replied, if your majesty is pleased with me and wants to grant my request, My petition is that my life and the lives of my people will be spared. They don't believe that the king knew she was a Jew until right here. My petition is that my life and the lives of my people will be spared. For my people and I have been sold to those who would kill, slaughter, and annihilate us. If we had only been sold as slaves, I could remain quiet, for that would have been a matter too trivial to warrant disturbing the king. Who would do such a thing? King Xerxes demanded. Who would dare touch you? Esther replied, this wicked Haman. It's just the king, Haman, and Esther. And Haman's, he is just tickled pink that he's invited to the banquet with just them. This wicked Haman. Haman grew pale with fright before the king and queen. Then the king jumped to his feet in a rage and went out in the garden. And then it got worse for Haman. But Haman stayed behind to plead with his life with Queen Esther, for he knew he was doomed. In despair, he fell on the couch where Queen Esther was reclining, just as the king returned from the palace garden. The king comes back in and finds Haman laying on top of his wife on a couch. You think that went over? The king says, will we even assault the queen right here in the palace before my very eyes? The king roared. And as soon as the king spoke, his attendant covered Haman's face, signaling his doom. They put a veil over their face. It was a death veil, a black veil. Everyone knew that means he was going to be killed. Then Harbana, one of the king's eunuchs, said, Haman has set up a gallows that stands 75 feet tall in his own courtyard. He intended to use it to hang Mordecai, the man who saved the king from assassination. Here it is. Then hang Haman on it, the king ordered. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had set up for Mordecai, and the king's anger was pacified. You set a trap for someone, you'll get caught in it yourself, right? Just two perfect stories of where that happened. So the lesson we learn from this is be careful you don't set traps for people. You know, try not to be someone that's calculating or does a lot of planning to set people up. Just don't do that. I know people like that, and I don't have enough energy for that. I'm not smart enough to play that game. I'm really not. Don't do that. Don't get into that world where you calculate chess moves to catch somebody. Don't do that. And again, the picture painted here is a pit like this, covered with a thin cover to catch wild animals. And you get caught in it yourself. Let's go into verse 28. Proverbs 26, 28. A lying tongue hates its victims. Let me get this. A lying tongue hates its victims, and flattery causes ruin. A lying tongue hates its victims, and flattery causes ruin. Let's look at the first one first. A lying tongue hates its victims. Hey, the first question, is it always wrong to lie?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, let's look at a verse. 1 Samuel 21. And boy, there's a big lesson in this one, folks. Please hear this one out. 1 Samuel 21. 1 Samuel 21, verse 1. David is running from Saul. That's where we start out. Remember, we saw Saul was very jealous of David. And David's on the run. So David decides to go to the Abimelech, the priest, Ahimelech. 21:1. David went to the city of Nob to see Ahimelech, the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he saw him. Why are you alone, he asked. Why is no one with you? The king has sent me on a private matter. This is a lie. David said, he told me not to tell anyone why I'm here. That's a lie. I have told my men to meet me here later. Now what is there to eat? Give me 5 loaves of bread. We don't have any regular bread, but there is holy bread, which I guess you can have if your young men have not slept with any women recently. Don't worry, David replied. I never allow my men to be with women when they're on a campaign. Isn't that interesting? That's how he tried to hang Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, by having him sleep with his wife when he was on leave. And since they stay clean even on ordinary trips, how much more this one? So since there was no other food available, the priest gave him holy bread. Now, let me go on a little further. It had just been placed fresh that day. Now Doeg, the Edomite, Saul's chief herdsman, was there that day for ceremonial purification. And so as David is saying all this to Ahimelech, Saul's servant sees it. And he goes and tells Saul. Go then to verse 16. Saul shows up and he's mad. And in this scene, Saul is going to kill Ahimelech. Verse 16, you will surely die, Ahimelech, along with your entire family, the king shouted. And he ordered his bodyguards, kill these priests of the Lord, for they are allies and conspirators with David. They knew he was running away from me, but they didn't tell me. But Saul's men refused to kill the Lord's priest. Saul told his employees, kill the priests. They wouldn't do it because they're priests. Then the king said to Doeg, you do it. So Doeg turned on them and killed them, 85 priests in all, still wearing their priestly tunics. Then he went to Nob, the city of the priests, and killed the priests' families. One guy, men and women, children and babies, and all the cattle, donkey, and sheep. Only Abiathar, one of the sons of Ahimelech, escaped and fled to David. When he told David that Saul had killed the priests, David exclaimed, I knew it. When I saw Doeg there that day, I knew he would tell Saul, now I have caused the death of all your father's family. Stay here with me, and I will protect you with my own life, for the same person wants to kill us both. Here's the point. And guys, as you read your Bible, this will save you some confusion. When you come across someone in the Bible that we look up to lying or doing something they shouldn't do, you may think, wow, so I guess you can do that because he did. Well, here's the truth. That was not God's plan A. There are a lot of stories in the Bible where the story you read is not God's plan A. Now, God had a way of still getting it to where he was going to get it eventually, a longer way around because of the person missing plan A, but this was not God's plan A. And one of the proofs are it got 85 priests and their families killed. It was not God. So I remember when I first read that, I thought, wow, David lied. David's a man after God's own heart. I guess there are times where it's okay to lie. No, it wasn't God's plan A. Let me give you some examples. Moses killed one of Pharaoh's servants, right? And then he fled. He took off. That wasn't God's plan A. God worked it out. At 40 years old, he saw he killed an Egyptian, and then Pharaoh gave orders that he should be caught and captured and brought back for the crime. He was raised as Pharaoh's son, but he killed an Egyptian. He flees into the wilderness for 40 more years. Maybe God's plan A was for him to lead the people out of Egypt at the age of 40. Could be. We don't know. But killing him wasn't God's plan A. There are tons of these stories in the Bible where you read it and you think because it worked out, this was God's will and plan all the way through. Oh, no. Wherever there's compromise, it was not. So don't ever miss that, because you can really get mixed up when you read these stories and say, but look at this, look what he did. He killed this Egyptian and God still did, but it wasn't plan A. It might have not even been plan B. It might have ended up being plan X. But God can make that work out. So yes, it is always wrong to lie. Always. Who was the woman? Sue, she had a Bible, Jew, Nazi prison camp. Corrie ten Boom tells the story of Corrie ten Boom, where they were told that that if they had any Bibles, they were supposed to turn them all in. And she could have tried to hide it. Instead, they did a strip search. They stripped all their clothes off of them, and she put the Bible in her hand and walked through, and no one saw it. It was in her hand, and she walked through the line, and no one saw it, no one took it. Now, can God do that? Sure, she can do that.
She's the one who hired the Jewish people.
Yes. Yeah, well, yeah, I'm not sure, but she hid. I'm not positive of that. I think so.
The concentration.
Yes. Then there's another story. Rabbi Zacharias told this a couple weeks ago. Listen to this story. This was during the Vietnam War. There were 52 U.S. soldiers that were in a Vietnamese prison camp, and they made plans to escape. They had the plan. I forget, it was tunnels, but it was all set. They had the time they were going to leave, and the guy that was the head of this was a Christian. And right before they left, 3 Viet Cong soldiers, guards, came up and said, "Are you guys making plans to escape?" And the Christian said, "We are." Because he wouldn't lie. "We are." The Viet Cong soldier says, "Can we go with you?" These Viet Cong soldiers, Ravi said, had experience in the jungle and in the sea. He labeled it a sea. I don't know what he was talking about, but in the water that they were going into to escape. And ultimately, it was because of these 3 Viet Cong that they made it. See, God is God. You know, we honor God. Now, maybe some of those men would have escaped. Maybe not all 52. Maybe none. But by telling the truth, they were in plan A. They were in plan A. So, you know, what do you do with all this? A couple quotes. John Wesley said, "I would not tell one lie to save all the world." King David said, "A man of integrity is a man who tells the truth even if it ruins him." Maybe that was a position he wrote after allowing all those priests to die. Lincoln said, Abraham Lincoln, "No man has a good enough memory to make a successful liar." Let me read these and then we'll end on these. These are good. Writing letters of recommendation. This is kind of funny. Writing letters of recommendation can be hazardous. Tell the truth and you might get sued if the contents are negative. Robert Thornton, a professor at Lehigh University, right up in Allentown, has a collection of, quote, virtually litigation-proof phrases called the Lexicon of Intentionality Ambiguous Recommendations, or abbreviated LIAR. Here are some examples. You get it? You want to write, someone asks you to write them a letter of recommendation, but they're a bad employee. And if you say something bad, they'll sue you. But you have to tell the truth. You get it? Here are some things he says. To describe an inept person, I write, quote, "I enthusiastically recommend this candidate with no qualifications whatsoever." To describe an ex-employee who had problems getting along with fellow workers, quote, "I am pleased to say that this candidate is a former colleague of mine." To describe an unproductive candidate, "I can assure you that no person would be better for the job." I can assure you that no person would be better for the job. To describe an applicant not worth considering, "I would urge you to waste no time in making this candidate an offer of employment." I would urge you to waste no time. And a manager was asked by his laziest employee for a recommendation for another job. The manager thought hard all night for something that would be honest without hurting the young man's chances. He finally wrote, quote, "You will be lucky if you can get him to work for you." Two more sayings. Those who think it's permissible to tell white lies soon become colorblind. And then lastly, this is interesting, signals of lying: increased blinking and pupil dilation, a facial expression incongruous with what's being said, increased body movement, especially hand gestures, shorter sentences, more speaking pauses and errors, more negative words and extreme words. Interesting, huh? So, let's close in prayer. Father, we thank you for the truth of your word, and I pray, Lord, you would remind us of these things when these events come up, especially this issue of defending ourselves. Lord, I want to be so defensive. I so want to defend myself. I just want to go toe-to-toe and prove that I'm right. And Lord, it's so fleshly, it's so wrong, it's so ungodly, it's so unbiblical. And so I pray, Lord, you'd help us to really lay this one down and give it to you and allow you the opportunity to do what only you can do, and that's to defend us in the way you would defend us. So, Lord, give us that wisdom. Lord, bless each one here. And I pray, Lord, that tomorrow would be a safe, good, joy-filled, peaceful holiday, not only for the people in this room, but in this community as well. And, Lord, we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. If you can stay for prayer, if you'd like to, the women will meet over there, the men over here. God bless you all. Thanks so much for coming. Happy 4th. Thank you. Thank you, Donna. Same to you.